Hey Kirsty, welcome to the SUPfm Podcast.
Hey, Simon, thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to finally have you on. And we spoke before, I think it was about 9 hours into the live stream of this year's SUP 12. So I'm not sure whether I was making very much sense at that point, but I am really looking forward to having a longer chat this time. I've always been fascinated by the area of mental performance, and I'm
Thanks.
really looking forward to a proper nerd out today about mental
Awesome.
performance and its importance for SUP and for life, because everything we talk about here can be applied just as easily to work and home life too. But before we do that, it's traditional to get to understand a little bit about your background and what brought you here to this point. So, could you just take us through your journey with SUP? How did you discover it, and what's been your journey so far in the sport?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually been exactly 10 years. I went on a trip to LA to visit my brother who was living there at the time. He's a film producer, and he had a house right a block from Redondo Beach. So
Well,
I was just there for the weekend. I actually wanted to take a surfing lesson, but I couldn't figure that out on the weekend. But there was a place called the Paddle House that was renting boards.
mm,
So I went out there, and I remember sitting on the plane coming back thinking, I have to get one of these. So yeah, so just 10 years of, paddling and then realizing how much there is to it to do it well,
mhm.
seeking out really good coaches. I'm super, super lucky that Larry Kane lives in the same city as me. I've been training under him, and then now it's all evolved into me doing work for Paddle Monster, which is amazing. And then it was probably 4 years ago now that I went to my first World Championships, ICF Worlds in Poland.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was just such an amazing experience to meet people from all over the world, people like you and Sarah, and it's been such a great thing in my life. So I'm really, really, really happy that I discovered it.
And I think I've heard you mention this, that you only discovered your competitive streak when you actually started racing.
Well, I've always played a lot of sports growing up. And then once I realized there was racing, I knew right away. I'm
Excellent.
like, okay, this is cool. So yeah, so it's honestly just a case of like I discovered it when I was 42 years old.
Mm,
And I've just really with my gut of following it and loving something and just totally embracing it. So a lot of really cool things have happened going to the different world championships. When I went
mm,
to Thailand,
mm.
they put on an amazing world championships there, and that's where I met Suzanne Lear. Then that led down a path of me going to her training camp in Fuerteventura. And when I came back from that first, I've been twice now, and when I came back from that first trip, that is actually when I was brainstorming, like, what else can I do to add to my resume? Because my ideal life would be if I get to spend more and more time with these kind of people and talking about sports, and that's when I came up with a mental performance thing. So I found a certification and did it. And as soon as I started doing that course, I was like, I'm obsessed
Mm.
with it. It's so interesting to me, and it all started from SUP.
Perfect. So let's talk a bit about mental performance. So, mental performance improvement generally isn't the first thing that people think about when they're looking to succeed in whatever competitive field they want to succeed in. They tend to be focused more on the physical frame and they ignore the mental frame. What is it that people leave on the table when they ignore the mental performance aspect of racing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely a certain aspect where you need to get down the physical side of things and the technicality of having a good paddle stroke and that sort of thing, right? But if you're competing, it's really incredible. So there are four domains of high performance. So you have physical, tactical, and mental. The mental domain drives all four of them. So you really are leaving a lot on the table to not stress it and try and get better at it. And it's just a question of seeking out the information and understanding just how much your thoughts and your routines are impacting your performance. once you start working on the mental strength side of things, it's amazing how much better you can do. And I just find, like, I know here in Canada, there are a lot of us who practice really hard and train hard and love our sport. We love racing. Yeah, like, you just want to, you don't have to be an Olympian to want to do better at your sport and just get the most out of it that you can. So when I'm working with an athlete, I go through 7 different skill sets that are mental, and each one of the 7 have actual tools and drills that they can do to get better at it. So it's one of those things where once you have somebody explain it to you and you have awareness of it, I then give you strategies to get better at it. And then it's up to the athlete to go and put it into action. But
yeah, and I guess what I'm getting to is people don't realise the significance of it. And I guess the other thing about mental approaches is that people who have a mental approach, whether it's functional or dysfunctional, basically it's theirs and they don't really have any alternatives. So I guess that's where your approach comes in. You can reframe things for people to see things in a different way and show that there are alternative ways, some of which have been tried and tested and work really well.
yeah, I mean, there's so much research that has been done in neuroscience and behavioral stuff that, and a lot of the skills are really based on, cognitive behavioral therapy type situations where, yeah, like, if you understand how the human brain works and how it thinks, you can kind of go from there. So, if you've maybe thought your whole life until you're 40 years old that, you really avoid mistakes at all costs because you think it's a terrible thing and it makes you a failure, to really have that knowledge to turn it around as a learning experience. And this is actually how you get better. Like, you don't have to run away from failure. It's like, if you do some thinking and reflecting about it, it will make you better. So, and most of us, our goal isn't to be the best we can be, like next Tuesday at whatever race. It's like, you just want to get better season over season, right? And Absolutely. It will really, to understand the mental game will really help you perform better and better.
Absolutely. So just before we dive into that framework, could you share a case study which shows the benefits that mental performance coaching can bring to someone?
Well, one of the most useful things that I find really make a big difference is visualization. And so a really good time was, because I've been working a lot with one of my closest friends, Maddie LeBlanc. She was one of my initial guinea pigs when I did my certification. So we talk a lot about the mental game. Yeah. And when she was going out to Bimini to do the crossing for CF, she had never raced the race before. She had never paddled in the dark before. They leave at midnight so that they arrive in Florida at a good time. And so we really did a lot of work. I had her seek out talking to other people who've done the race to get a feel for what it will be like. There was a fair bit of documentation of video and stuff that she could look up to see what it would look like. And then when you do the visualization, which is imagining it in full detail using all 5 senses. And when you're doing that, you're actually forming the same neuronal pathways in your brain almost as the same as if you'd actually done it yourself. We had a plan of her doing a lot of visualization. I made an audio that actually lives on my YouTube channel. So if anybody wants to have a listen to it, they're welcome to. And she just did a lot of that so that when she actually was on the beach in Bahamas, it didn't feel like the first time and, oh my God, what's happening? It's like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. I've seen myself paddling really well in these conditions, and off I go. So it's really all of the mental performance skills. The whole goal of it is to keep your body calm and present, because that's how you're going to think your clearest. That's how you're going to perform your best. You're going to make better decisions when you need to make a decision if all of that is calm and cool and collected, basically. I feel like it's a well-known story, but Michael Phelps, the Olympian swimmer, from the States, he wrote a book, and in it he says he, visualized hundreds of times all of those races that he won Olympic gold medals in. And some of his visualizations involved him getting water in his goggles totally filled up. And it did happen in one of those races. He still won gold. And afterwards he was like, I'd done it before. I'd done it. I'd won the gold with my goggles filled with water, and it just didn't faze me. He just went and did what he does.
And of course, Maddie won that, or she came in first place, didn't she? She managed to make that crossing. And that was a year where it was a little bit problematic, I believe. Just disregard the fact that it's the world centre for shark activity, but the thunder and lightning over the sea. So a lot of people had to abandon, unfortunately. But she came across in first place. Okay, so let's go through the framework. And the first one, which I know is quite a major one, is something that you call elite mindset, which I guess people all would recognise also as the growth mindset. So could you just explain a bit about the elite mindset?
Sure. It is. It's, when I call it elite mindset, it's really an expansion on growth mindset, which really embraces failure as a way to learn and get better. But the only way that really happens is if you have the awareness and afterwards are asking yourself questions. So one of my tools in Elite Mindset is well, better, how. So when you finish a training session, when you finish one of your big races, for sure, one of the tools to give you a way to reflect on it and get better is to ask yourself what went well in the race. And I like people to think of a bunch of things that went well, because negative things have 7 times the impact on ourselves and our thinking as positive. So think of what went well, pick out some things that you could have done better, that you wish had gone better, and then come up with a plan of how you're going to do that and how you can make that improvement. And the cool thing is when you journal it, eventually you're going to start to see where things that were in your better column that you wish you could fix are suddenly moving up, because awareness is everything. So that's a good way to improve and get better race after race. And another one I have is E plus R equals O, which is basically when events happen in our life, and they're going to happen, some good, some bad. How you respond to them really is what forms the outcome. So event plus your response equals the outcome. And that is for sure straight out of psychology and just reframing things of, how can I take a breath, name what my response is, name what my feeling is, really take a minute to think about it, because your first response doesn't have to be your only response. And then it does affect what the outcome is. So there's certain ways of looking at things that once I kind of talk through with an athlete how the brain works, how our negative thoughts happen, and how just naturally there's such a high percentage, like around 70% of one's normal thinking thoughts are negative. And once people understand that, it's like, oh, okay, so now I just need you to practice saying positive, good things to yourself, reminding yourself of the hard work you're putting in, things like that. Because the negative thoughts that are happening are not reality. They're just your interpretation of the reality. And just because you're thinking them doesn't mean that they're true, or that's what.
Yeah, I remember someone saying, if you talk to your friends in the same way as you talk to yourself in your own head, would you have any? What you need is another voice in there which is empathetic, and you say, right, okay, you didn't know about that, or that's something that you can work on. But just coming back to the growth mindset, so that there's a fundamental thing in life that has been tested in psychology, and it's all about the belief that you can grow and you can develop. I think Carol Dweck wrote the book on it, but what she discovered is that children ended up doing more when they were rewarded verbally for the effort that they put in, rather than that they were somehow fantastic. So saying to little Johnny, oh, you're so clever, you're fantastic, they then get into a fixed mindset where they need to maintain that sort of brilliance, that perceived brilliance, so they don't want to make mistakes. Whereas what the growth mindset says is it's all about the process and the effort that you put in, and and your resilience, and that's how you get somewhere. And it's just making the switch between those things and that sort of realization that really does make a difference, and where all of this is sort of built up from.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the whole idea that you're not born with certain skills, you're not born with the intelligence amount that you have, and in athletics. So it's, with hard work and seeking out good coaching, you can work hard at getting better at your sport or whatever it is. So really, as a coach too, it's important to know, like, it's probably not a great idea to be, praising somebody on their natural talent and what their talent is, and keeping on that line. It's like, praise their effort, praise their, remark on the work that they're putting in, because that's really how they're going to get better. And it's important for the athlete to hear that and to know that, and not just think that, oh, I'm never going to get better, I'm never going to, reach the elite level of SUP racing, or whatever it is for your sport. It's like, no, if you put the work and the time in, and anybody can do it.
Yeah,
Anybody
absolutely.
and everybody can do it. So there's no need to be, jealous of somebody else who's getting results that you wish you got. That is definitely a fixed mindset, straight out of Carol Dweck.
And as I'm very fond of saying, if you're not getting wetter, you're not getting better. I picked up SUP sort of similar age that you did. And I remember going out on my board to start with and wobbling on the smallest waves out there, and looking at other people up there who were effortlessly, the swell was moving and they were moving with it, and thinking, wow, that's fantastic. Why aren't I at that level? But of course, you've got to do your apprenticeship. You've got to fall in enough times, and
Exactly.
and adapt and move your feet and all of that sort of stuff before you get to that point. And it's just giving yourself a break, and just trusting yourself to do that stuff. The other principle to all of this as well is about sort of the neurons in the brain and learning new skills and how all of that works, because there's also another saying, what fires together wires together, which
Yes.
basically means if you build in your brain a connection between two learning points, and then you really reinforce that with practice, it ends up getting so reinforced and so solid that you can end up doing things automatically. And that's another principle that people don't tend to realize. And also, they don't tend to realize that it doesn't matter what your age is, you've still got that ability to do it. There's a terrible saying in the UK, don't know whether it's worldwide, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yes.
And that's absolutely not true. So whatever your age, if you put effort into something, then you can get those neurons to wire together. And the other thing which ties all of this together is that the more difficulty it takes you mentally to put those things together, that pain in your brain or annoyance or whatever, that is all the learning process. That is the signs that things are starting to knit together. But a lot of people avoid that pain, and they just step away from it and abandon it. Whereas staying with it and going with it is the only way of properly integrating those skills.
Yeah, I find a really helpful analogy is, if you were on farmland where there was tall grass through a field, and if you walked from one side of the field to the other once, the grass would part while you walked, but it would come right back up again. But if you did the same path 100 times, you would beat down that path, and there would suddenly be a pathway formed, right? And it's exactly how the neurons firing and wiring together, how that works. So, and it's, I don't want to jump ahead to my number 6 skill of visualization, but that is how visualization works. Is even if you're not physically doing it, in your mind, if you're picturing it really vividly, it is still forming that walk through the grass, and it is still helping the physical stuff that you're doing.
Exactly. So the brain doesn't know the difference between reality and a really experience. So you visualize it, but integrating the sounds and the smells and all of that sort of stuff, that's a way of really sort of plumbing that through. So anyway, I think in terms of the elite mindset, that's one of the really big ones, isn't it, that underpins everything. Right, let's move on to focus. So would you like to explain a bit about focus?
Yeah, so focus is really important to be able to have that skill and pull it out when you really need it. So let's say Sarasota had some great examples of the start line of the sprinting. It was so windy, and they had the cones that our nose of our boards had to be into. And you had to be able, now luckily I have Larry, so he's taught me how to stay put in really windy conditions, but not everybody can do it. And so the starting line for the sprints was like a few minutes in some cases, because they wouldn't start it until everybody was in place. And you really need that skill of like focus, staying where you need to stay. And so a lot of that just comes from awareness of, who you are, what you're about, setting up things so that you are actually having good habits and knowing what your routine is going to look like to help you get to your goals. And a big thing I talk with my clients about is it's called BFS. And so it's body language, focus, and self-talk. When you're working on those three things, when you're actually doing them all really well, that is doing confidence. Confidence is actually an action. It's based in some evidence and some groundwork of what you've accomplished, but it's mostly something that you do. And so to have the awareness of good body language, to have the good awareness about your focus, and is it on things you can control, and is it in the present, not in the past. You had like a really crap beach run start and you fell in, and now you're 5 minutes into the race. Well, are you still thinking about the crappy beach start? Because that's not helping your situation. So you need to be able to let things go, and also not be thinking about the future. And if you're in first place in the middle of the technical race, it doesn't serve you to be thinking about standing on top of the podium, right? Exactly. It's like you still have to finish the race and focus on what you're actually doing right now. So so focus is really an important point in mental performance for sure.
And you talk about encouraging people to be where your feet are. That's all part of that equation.
Yeah. And it sets the groundwork for later, which is things like you need to understand your body language, focus, and self-talk so that you can recognize when it's not going well and get yourself back into a good situation. So it's things like that. But there are things like concentration grids where you can actually do them online and improve which is kind of cool. So again, it's not a skill that you have or don't have. It's like, well, you can improve it. You can improve it. So with the right tools.
Absolutely. And some people don't even necessarily think about things in these terms. Okay, let's move on now to number 3, which is awareness. So we referred a bit to that earlier on, but I guess it's about being conscious of one's own surroundings and also the internal state to respond effectively. And it's quite interesting, that awareness thing. And obviously the fear or the adrenaline and getting hyped up, you'd need to get hyped up for a race, but actually that doesn't really help you to keep aware and keep your eye on what's actually happening around you.
Exactly. So really it's emotional regulation, basically, of knowing when you need to be hyped up and excited and when you do need to just take it down a notch and keep things calm. But yeah, basically for awareness, it's, having the understanding of what's going on in yourself, understanding what's going on around you. And it's kind of an overall theme for mental performance, because you can't implement any of these pillars without having the awareness first to understand why it's important, how it's important. And then once you're aware, then you can start to improve on things and get better at things, right?
And again, there's a sort of brain science thing that happens there. And obviously everyone gets adrenaline when they're in a race situation. If you get too much fear and too much adrenaline going, all of the blood flows to the base of your skull, and it doesn't go to the thinking part of your brain, so you can't think clearly. So it's all about just basically titrating that adrenaline just so it's at the right level. I
Yeah.
remember I was speaking to April Zilg about one of her Carolina Cup with where she spotted that the water flow was slightly different. There was a longer track, but the water flow was better in one direction, and everyone else was heading out on the shortest track. So because she was aware and thinking clearly, she was able to follow that route and get a win. So it can really lead to a positive result if you are thinking
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm talking about as far as keeping everything calm and your mind thinking really clearly, right?
Mm,
One of the tools that I use for awareness is called, or sorry, it's in the focus category actually, but it's ABCs of focus. And if you took sup racing, if that's our thing, so if you
mm,
took a big smorgasbord of every physical and mental tool in racing, what are the three that are most important to you on that particular race that you want to focus on so that you can race your best? And like for Sarasota, it was breathe, focus, and what was the third one? Oh, and reach and rotate. So I picked a couple of mental things, one physical thing, and when I was on the starting line, getting ready for the start to happen, then then it was like, okay, I'm just repeating the three things, the ABCs of what I
mm,
already decided and put my intention behind of what I want to focus on and what will help me. And so when I'm on the starting line, I'm making sure I take nice slow breaths in and out to try and keep my physiology calm. But my mind, instead of having nothing there and knowing that that's when negative things are going to come in, it's like, no, I have a plan. And my plan is
mm.
I'm going to repeat on, just keep repeating in my head. And sometimes I said it out loud, the three things. And
Yeah.
then guess what? Then I'm as relaxed as I can be for the start of a race. And I react really nicely to the starting horn of the race. And my mind is on what it should be on.
Mm.
And then you have your best race, like the best race you're capable of, right?
And
Yeah.
without the disadvantages of having all of those goblins going around your brain, say, "Oh my God, I'm at the start of ICF race. Better not mess this up. I've spent all this money coming down here," and you're just putting yourself under that pressure, and it
Exactly.
allows you to do the best that you can, rather than the disadvantages of just sort of tripping yourself up before you make your first move.
Yeah, yeah. Like imagine you're at the start of the race. Like in Thailand, I remember tons of people on the beach, just before the race heats were about to start. And imagine if you're 2 minutes before your own race and you're busy thinking about what amazing pivot turns Marie Carmen is doing, or oh my gosh, look at how strong she looks, or like
Yeah.
that is not gonna get the best out of yourself when the race actually happens. So it's like, no, keep my eyes on my own thoughts. I've planned and prepared what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
And what I really found made a difference in Sarasota, because that was my third world championships, what really helped was knowing that the whole year, every time I had a training session, especially on the water, I would practice those. I would,
Yeah.
I had my paddle monster program from Larry, and if it was 10 pieces of whatever level of effort, at the beginning of each of those 10, I would be practicing what am I going to say to myself in Sarasota? How am
Mm,
I going to behave and how am I going to
mm,
do things? And
mm,
then when Sarasota arrives, I've done it hundreds of times and it's really not
mm.
a big deal. And I don't have to think that hard about it because I've put all the work into training it along the way.
Okay, let's move on to the next one of the nine, which is process over outcome. And this one, again, you can see all of these meshing together in this fantastic framework of performance, can't you? That one definitely ties in a bit to growth, but just tell us a bit about that.
Process over outcome is everything. It is, and you're right. Everything kind of overlaps and overlays, and when I'm working with an athlete, that's usually my starting point of just finding out what they know about mental performance. What are they actually executing on and doing already, if anything? But then figuring out what they need, and then I pull out the different skill sets to address it. But process over outcome is it's all about controlling the controllables and understanding what is within your control. And what is not in your control are external things. Things like the race conditions, the other racers who show up to the race, how much preparation the other racers have put in. You have no control over that. So all of these external things, also what people think, what people's opinions are. You don't want to go to your biggest race of the year and your whole goal is to impress your coach or somebody else. So really process over outcome. When you're thinking about what you can control, we call it your APE. So it's all things that have to do with you. So there's a lot of A's, P's, and E's. So your own appearance or body language, your own attitude, your preparation, and the work that you've put into preparing yourself physically for it and mentally. Your process, like have you set up yourself with good daily habits that are going to help you get to your goals? Are you consistent with them? Because consistency is everything. And I think people mistake consistency being like, oh, I have to give 100%, every single workout of this week, or it's not as good. But the consistency is way more important than the actual amount of time and the actual, percentage of what you think it is. So that's really important. Ease are things like your energy level that you bring to your training sessions. You have control over that. Your effort that you're putting in. So basically everything to do with yourself and nothing to do with any, referees or umpires or other competitors. And the cool thing about controlling the controllables is that if you actually just go 100% all in on what you can control, which is yourself, often the outcomes and the results and all of that other stuff, they do take care of themselves. And your best chance to get the outcomes that you want are by going all in and just focusing on yourself. So that is a really big point of emphasis of when I'm talking with somebody. If anything that they're saying is remotely leaning towards what other people are thinking or outcomes, or those are like an outcome is not usually a good goal to have for your big A race, right? You need to have goals that have to do with yourself. And when you're focused on that, that is actually your best chance at getting what you want.
100%. Yeah, I just sort of think back to endurance things that I've been involved in, or even, conversations. So we had a Navy SEAL on here talking about surfing veterans. And I was quite interested in the whole Hell Week with the US Navy SEALs. So it's this week where they get an absolute beasting for the entire time. And the successful people who do that concentrate on splitting things down into small parts and just achieving those things. So if you set yourself little targets as you go, that's all part of the way of making things better. And the process, focusing on the process, letting the outcome work it out for itself. I think that's just such a healthy thing. And consistent throughout a whole breadth of different sports as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's really a great way to go through life, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you're going to work every day. Don't worry about what other people are thinking and doing, and
just do the right things at the right time, and continue learning and so on, and you'll get to where you are, or you'll have a good, satisfying life where you feel like you're developing and moving forward rather than sort of being stuck. And I think that's the problem, isn't it? When you feel you're stuck psychologically, that's the worst place to be in. But if you've got options, because and you're just concentrating on the process, that sort of gives you more opportunities to develop. That is a really, really important one: process over outcome.
Yeah.
Right, let's move on to the next one, which is confidence and self-control. So that's the active practice of confidence through specific behaviours and the ability to manage emotional states. And you've already referred a bit to that earlier on. So what do you think the biggest myth is about confidence that people generally come to you with?
I think a lot of people think that confidence is something you either have or you don't have. And I think they think, you know, other people have it and they see somebody else appearing confident and they just wish they had it. When in fact, anyone can be confident and you do confidence. So there is a foundation and a small portion of confidence which is actually, previous efforts and previous things that you've accomplished. It's definitely part of it, but confidence is actually something that you do. So when your body language is nice and tall and like you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof and not curled up and eyes down and that sort of thing, right? When you have good body language, when you have good focus where you are present and you're where your feet are at and you're focused on things that you can control and not things that you can't control. And self-talk is a huge one where you've practiced and gotten better at saying good things to yourself, not negative things to yourself. That is how you do confidence. And I would argue that if you looked over and saw somebody else on the beach that looked really confident, well, why do they look confident? They probably look confident because their body language is exuding confidence and it looks confident. And maybe they're in the moment and they're just enjoying things as they're happening. But guess what? Everybody can do that. If you know to focus on it, everybody can do it. And the brilliant thing about this is that you don't have it one day and don't have it the next day because you're doing it. And you can do it every day if you want to.
Absolutely. It's the connection between the physiology and the brain. But certainly I feel that when my shoulders are back and when I'm standing tall,
Yeah,
my body and my brain are connected, hopefully. And the brain says, oh, body standing tall, that must be confident. I will feel confident. So you're not necessarily fooling the brain, but you're giving it all the signals that you are confident. So
exactly.
that's the performative bit of the whole thing. Coming back to your self-talk. So again, what you're saying there on the start line to yourself, letting the empathic voice in your head come through, or repeating those mantras just to keep yourself really focused. And it really interesting what you said about some people, think people have just got confidence or they haven't. That's a fixed versus growth mindset right there, isn't it? People are not born with
Completely.
the ability for confidence or whatever. You've got to sort of grow it really.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody can do it. That's the growth mindset part of
You've got
it.
to choose. You've got to choose to do
And
it.
and really what we tell ourselves in our self-talk is what we create. Like if we
Mm,
tell ourselves that the world is awful and I'm so unlucky and bad things always happen to me, then your brain takes that in the salience network and it says, "Oh, that's what she thinks is important. So we're going to look for that."
yeah.
And if you tell yourself repeatedly, I am a world class mental performance coach and I'm helping people all over the world. And if that's my self talk going about my day, then I'm going to
Mm,
look for things that are in line with that. So it really is what you create, and you have control over that. You can pick it. One thing I love to tell people I'm working with is a lot of people, and this kind of flows with confidence, is a lot of people think you have to have the feelings. So let's say confidence. You have to feel confident to then act confident, to then have the identity, I'm confident.
mm,
And
mm,
it is, in fact, the other way around. You decide your identity, so you can decide you're confident. Then you do the actions that are that identity. And then the feelings come after you do those two things.
mm,
So you don't have to wait around to suddenly one day feel like, oh, I am really like comfortable in my skin and I'm confident and here's how I want to go about my day in the world. It's like, no, you decide ahead of time, This is why I love working with teenagers and youth and going into schools to coach this stuff is you can decide. You decide what it is that you want to be and how you want to be, and then you do the actions that are in line with that. And then once you're doing that, guess what? Your brain is remembering that this is important to you, so it keeps repeating it. There's a good quote of a number, which is you're 94% likely today to think what you told yourself yesterday. So if you just practice and get into a bit of a routine where you're telling yourself good things, telling yourself things that are in line with what you decide you want your identity to be, you're 94% more likely to do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
It works the same in reverse with negative stuff, but that is
most people
how it
know how
works.
to do that anyway. And it's great that you're doing this with teenagers and so on, but why aren't they taught at school? Because
Yes.
they're so fundamental to being a good
Yes.
citizen and understanding how the world works and how to push yourself on. And it's not part of the curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And that's why I love doing that sort of thing. I feel too, like when I go in and I talk to, going to high schools and coach them, I'm talking about sports, but I make sure to remind them frequently that exactly what I'm telling you that is going to work for you to be a great basketball player, you can also use it for your studies. You're going to use it in university or college or whatever you do after high school. And you're going to use it in your life, in your career, in your family. It's all the same skill.
And it must give you such massive satisfaction when you're having these conversations, because whether it's kids or athletes, I know that there's a moment where you suddenly see their eyes change and suddenly the penny drops, and you know that you've sort of changed their mind or reframed something important for them.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I love having these conversations with people about this stuff. But that is a really great thing to see. And I don't know, it was a couple of days ago. I was just thinking, I was like, you know what, if I won like a super lotto and like a lot of millions of dollars and didn't have to work, I'd be thrilled because I could just do this. Like I could just have these conversations and share this knowledge. Like that to me would be amazing.
Oh, it's an amazing reward seeing that happen. Right, okay, confidence, self-control that was. So moving on to the last two. So we've got visualization and breath work. And again, you can see all of the sort of framework sort of coming together on this.
Yeah, so let me just sort of give a full explanation of how to do it, because the way that it's going to help and work in your pathways in your brain is if your body is in a really relaxed state. So, really important to know that if you're going to spend 10 minutes doing visualization, don't rush home from work through mad traffic and then throw yourself on your sofa and be like, okay, so I've got my 10 minutes now. So here I am. And like, let's go. Your body has to be relaxed in order for the work to be done of the wires firing together. So you need to be relaxed. So ideally before bed or first thing in the morning or another time. The other way that it works is you need to make it as real as possible. So you need to use all five senses, feel the feelings, smell the smells, hear what's going on around you, really envision it in a lot of detail. And that is how the pathways will fire. And so, for example, I remember talking to Maddie a fair bit about when we go down to do a training session, when we're on the dock about to hit the water, that is a great time to just take 10 minutes and visualize, because you can smell the water and you can hear the sounds of what's going on around you in that environment, right? So that is, yeah. And it's especially too, if somebody has an injury is a really big thing as well, where you can't physically do the work. It's a great way to feel like you're still in it and still away from your sport for too long. So that definitely really helps as well. And, if you have a big, like the World Championships are just wrapping up today, right, in Abu Dhabi. If people are putting in a lot of time on the water and in the gym and a lot of physical training time, visualization is perfect to add to it, because it's not maxing out your nervous system. But you're still getting the practice of a great technique or a great start to the race, or envisioning yourself going around a buoy, falling off, and envision how great and the best you can possibly get back up on your board and catch up. Things like that. So you can kind of do different scenarios. And the other thing a lot of people will ask me too is like, do I do the visualization where I'm like watching myself, or do I do it where I'm in it? And which is a really good question. And basically, when you're envisioning yourself doing it and you're in your own body doing it, that really helps with acquiring skills. It will help you acquire the skills of good paddle technique and that sort of thing. And if you envision it once in a while where you're actually watching yourself race, then that is more of a thing helping with confidence and just believing in yourself that you can do it. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and it doesn't take a lot of time. So it's definitely a wicked tool to add to your toolkit.
Absolutely. You don't have to sort of pay out for a gym to do that sort of workout. You can fit that in where you can. And just a couple of sort of callbacks. So you talk about Maddie visualizing it. Another really important thing about visualizing, as you said, is to get it as accurate to the sort of situation you're in at the moment. So if say we were 3 weeks out from Abu Dhabi and or El Salvador, the IS, watching videos of the environments and just using that as a basis for you visualizing being there on the ground there, that's a really effective way of doing it. You can use it in everyday stuff. If you're going to give a presentation or whatever, imagine the room you're doing it, imagine the people sat there in rapt attention as you sort of talk through that. That's a really good way of getting that sort of that pre-rehearsal through, so you got the muscle memory. Just the other thing which just came to me is I read a really fascinating book a while ago about a prisoner of war in Vietnam, American, who was shot down, and I think he was there for about 4 or 5 years, and he was in a room. 7 years. There we go. You know the story. Was it Gerald Coffey? Is that? I don't know. He was one of. Anyway, this particular guy. He was in a room. He couldn't play golf. So obviously, because he was in a prison cell. So basically, every day he played several rounds of golf in his mind, and then when he got out, remarkably, he still had all of the motor skills and ended up going round in a perfect round, despite the fact that he hadn't been on a golf course for 7 years. And we know that practice is quite important for golf. So that is the sort of a apocryphal validation of this approach, that you can learn the technique and the motor skills and start to build up all of those connections in your brain, because your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I have heard that story, and it's just incredible to me that is how it works, but it does. Ideally, so if you're like right now, we're kind of at the point where we're starting off season training for SUP racing, right? Like we're going into winter, and maybe people feel like there isn't a lot of stuff that they can do, when in fact, it's the perfect time to be, seeking out the mental side of things, and, having the time to really and all of the different skills and what you can do with them, and then start to practice them. And once you start practicing them, then now we're into next spring. Well, now you can start putting it into action when you're back on the water, and then ramp it up. It really is so similar to physical skills, where you don't go to the gym once and get shown once how to do, a bench press. You have to go repeatedly, and you need reminders of things, and you need somebody to help you get better at it. And over time, you do it better. So it's the mental stuff it's exactly the same way.
And you don't just use one tool to get there. So, and this is where someone like yourself, who understands the framework and has got a variety of tools, because there may be things that might not work sometimes, so you go on to something else.
Exactly.
So it's just finding whatever route you can through to that end product.
Exactly. Everybody's so different and comes to the table with different experiences and different mindset. different beliefs about themselves, right? So yeah, so it takes a little bit of talking through to figure out what people need and what they want, and then you need help, generally speaking, along the way to get better at it if you've decided it's important to you. So yeah, it's been really cool to, like, Larry Kane has been alongside of me from the get-go, from me having the idea
Yeah.
to doing the certification and hearing all of me yammering away about all of this cool stuff I was learning, right? So so it really was a case of just organically, we're chatting about all sorts of stuff anyways, and then for him and John to decide to bring me on to Paddle Monster was really special to me, that they asked me to do that, because
Well,
it
you're a
just
great,
shows. Yeah.
yeah, you're a great addition to the team, and you're yammering on, as you called it, to Larry. I can tell you, it's done some good. I don't know whether he would have said this anyway, but I had a couple of chats with him the end of the sort of the season break,
Yes.
and he
Yes.
wanted to particularly talk about the importance of mental performance and so on. So yeah, he's definitely got the message on that one.
Yeah. 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 For sure.
So just on that sort of within that flavour, and I just wanted to ask. I mean, obviously we all learn things from others. I'm wondering if you learn any sort of psychological approaches or sort of mental performance insights from your Paddle Monster coaching team.
Like, what do you mean? Sorry.
And so are there any insights that Larry has provided where you've thought, oh right, that's a sort of useful approach that I can sort of steal and use or whatever?
Well, you know, the thing that is cool is when I'm talking with Larry about different things, and from the get-go, when I've been training with him, specifically with him, for like 8 years now. He has stories. He has things that he's uncovered along the way of his journey, where I can piece it together and see where it fits in on my, my,
Mm,
if I look at my skills and what I work with people on. Some of it he just came up with on his own. Some of it he, like, he figured out on his own at 11 years old, that when he was biking from his home down to the water, that if he just visualized paddling with really good technique, he would hit the water ready to go.
yeah,
Whereas the other guys, he could see it took them like 15 or 20 minutes to really kind of warm up and get technique where it was really good. Whereas he was just doing it right off the bat. So, and he figured that out on his own. Some other cool stuff is that he's obviously been on Team Canada for a long time, and they have, sports psychologists that work with them. And some of the stuff was interesting to him, but some of it he had already figured out and was doing on his own. But the interesting thing with Larry and I, when we talk, it's like he has lots of stories that would show he does these things, but
yeah,
he really loves the fact that I went out and got a certification and have, like, basically the full toolbox.
mm,
And now my expertise is figuring out how to share those tools with people and helping them figure out which is which. So
yeah,
he's sort of the story guy, and he's done it, but it's
mm,
a little bit different than a coach that can actually, like, sit down and figure out with you what it is that you need help with, and then go about giving you those tools and figuring out what'll work for you. So yeah, so for him and John to put me on the platform of Paddle Monster, really, to me, says a lot about what they think of the skills that I can help people with.
absolutely. And it's a colossal gap, and it's a colossal gap that people don't necessarily realize they have, unless either they're compelled to do it or they're interested enough to look at all opportunities to perform. And it's a shame it's that way around. But hopefully,
Yeah.
the conversation that we have today will show the variety of different value that and a different approach to mental performance can really make.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And I think, I mean, I've always been interested in sports my whole life. So, I've heard of Olympic teams having a sports psychologist, and professional athletes having a sports psychologist, but this is really something that is much more accessible and it's much more practical, I think than a sports psychologist per se. Usually those people are fully booked and they're dealing with high level athletes. And the stuff that I coach is all of the practical stuff that is what you would take away from a session with a sports psychologist. Except now it's accessible and available to people like you and me who have a sport that they love and want to get better at it. But you'd find it pretty hard, I think, to call up a sports psychologist and get an appointment with them, basically. Yeah.
And some of the principles sort of apply across the piece, and all you're interested in is helping someone's performance, that the sort of background to it and all the sort of psychological qualifications or whatever, the clinical stuff, that what you're delivering is pure value and a variety of tools to get there. So that's kind of the core of what you offer.
And I have to say, so Brian Kane is who developed the certification, the mental performance mastery certification that I have. And Brian has his master's in sports psychology and studied under Dr. Ken Ravizza, who's a really well-known sports psychologist. But for the past 25 years, I think it's been now, he's currently working with, 2 players on the Toronto Blue Jays. He works with a ton of Major League Baseball players, NFL players, a lot of pro athletes. So his time is gobbled up by pro athletes who see the value and see the results of it. And what I'm coaching and teaching people is exactly the same thing. So what he's showing, Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL, what he's teaching him and what is keeping his career going, because his mental game is dialed in, is exactly what I'm teaching my 18-year-old girls volleyball team, somebody who comes on the Paddle Monster platform. It's all the same tools, and just dialing it in and working with somebody who is willing to put the work in and take action on it, basically.
No, it's amazing stuff. And as I said, validation when people sort of switch on, but it's also when people go to an event and then they come back and they say, blimey, it completely changed. And then you can see them, really being a believer in how this works. But you've got to get onto that momentum to actually see it in practice. But I would obviously encourage anyone, regardless, because you can get advantages in sport and your racing, but this is so much wider than this. This is about your life, and you can apply it in whatever environment you essentially want to. Is there anything that we've missed before we sign off?
I think my biggest thing that I want people to get out of this stuff is, we're talking about it in terms of high performance and getting the best performance out of yourself. But honestly, it's about finding the joy and really being present, being in the moment, and just finding the joy of the thing that you love. And so using these to take some of the stress away or the anxiety away. But really the bottom line is to enjoy life and enjoy your sport. And that's what I hope people will learn when they start learning these kind of skills.
Absolutely. And they're skills that do need to be taught. They're skills that we don't all necessarily have in the right sort of depth. So there's a huge amount of value in performance coaching and
exactly
mindset. All links, including the one to Kirsty's website, MacMillan Elite Mindset.com, are in the show notes, including how you can get into contact with Kirsty and lift your own game through improved mental performance. So, Kirsty, thanks again for sharing your knowledge and skills with us on the SUPfm podcast, and see you on the water.
Yep, absolutely. Hopefully I see you in person one of these days. That would be great. And thanks for having me and letting me share what I know. The more people that learn about it, the happier it makes me. So that's awesome. Thank you for having me.
A huge thank you to Kirsty MacMillan for sharing such fascinating insights into the mental performance side of SUP racing. And if you'd like to help the podcast, please leave a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at SUPfm Podcast so you never miss an episode. And until next time, take care and we'll see you on the water.